All right. Well, it's 10 o'clock by my clock. Everybody hear me all right? I want to thank everybody for coming today. And so we're going to go ahead and get kicked off with this committee meeting here about vehicle crimes. And I'm sure that I know we got one objective, but I'm sure we're going to lead in some others because I've already had some calls that we'll know what I was going to talk about. So the first person we want to go ahead on the agenda is Derek Corbett with Pull Apart. Where's Derek at? You want to come right here and right there at the end of the table? And what number is that, Mike? Is that? So I ain't got to do nothing. Just ask questions over here and she does it for me. All right. Go ahead there whenever you get ready.
Check. Well, I appreciate y'all calling me up so quickly. I thought I was going to have time to cram back there for at least a couple minutes of opening statements, but clearly no. First, I want to thank Chairman Corbett and the committee for bringing this committee together. Vehicle crimes are an issue that hit close to home with us, and I know it does for a lot of other industries around the state. So for you guys to put this much attention, this much time, and this much effort into it means a lot to us, and we're grateful to you. Pull Apart is one of the leading auto recyclers in the country. We buy hundreds of thousands of cars every year, and we buy tens of thousands of cars in Georgia alone. These are for the most part end-of-life vehicles that we're purchasing. And when we do this, we're providing several different benefits to our community. Number one, we're canceling the titles on these vehicles. That helps prevent fraud, helps prevent VIN cloning, which is a crime prevention in and of itself. We are removing hazardous contaminants from Georgia's environment. We're preventing pollution and we're protecting Georgia's water supply. In fact, Pull Apart is a leader in the nation's mercury switch removal program. Each mercury switch contains enough mercury in it to pollute up to 132,000 gallons of water over and above the US EPA drinking standards. So taking those out of the environment, big deal for Georgia, big deal for everyone downriver too. We reduce waste by extending the life of the vehicle components. We take these components, we put them back into circulation as used auto parts. So we're reusing these components, which is priority number one. And for those that can't be reused, we put into the recycling stream, and we're turning those back into feedstock, going back into our supply chain. In fact, Georgia's House passed a resolution that established recycling as essential to supply chains around the country, and that was bolstered by the president's executive order that evaluated supply chains and focused on recycling as essential to maintaining healthy supply chains. So we're proud to be a part of that effort that we think is very important. Our mission: reduce, reuse, recycle. It means a lot to us. The contributions we make to reducing humanity's footprint's a big deal. And it takes a lot of us working together, a lot of us in the recycling community working together to be effective at reducing that footprint. But importantly, we have to be profitable as recyclers in order to maintain our businesses. To keep contributing to that footprint reduction, we have to remain profitable. And crime, vehicle crime specifically in our industry, puts a big dent in that bottom line. It's something that we wrestle with every day. It significantly impacts not only Pull Apart, but our entire industry. And we are invested in being a part of a solution here in the state of Georgia, and for us nationwide, to try to crack down on these crooks. The commodities that make recycling a worthwhile business are also the same commodities that make it a high value crime and a high value target. As demand for the commodities that are in these vehicles, catalytic converters and the special metals that are in those catalytic converters, aluminum wheels, the vehicles themselves, as the value for these commodities increases, so does the crime. It's amazing how free market principles really apply to the criminal underworld. I didn't realize that until I got into the recycling industry, but it does. here at Pull Apart, between copper wiring, aluminum wheels, vehicles, catalytic converters, and the other components in the vehicle, we've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars as victims of crime. In fact, not long ago at our Atlanta South facility, we had a break-in, and we had some crooks come in, and they hot wired 4 of the vehicles that were in our production yard. They drove one of the vehicles through the back door of the facility, and they proceeded to load that vehicle up with over 300 catalytic converters. And while they were loading that vehicle up with catalytic converters, some others had the other vehicles out by the battery area, and they loaded up over 400 batteries into their vehicles. So they used those vehicles that they hot wired once they broke into the production facility, exited, took off with 300 catalytic converters, 4 vehicles, and over 400 batteries. None of that was recovered. The damage to us was well over 6 figures. And what's worse, though, is it just served as fuel for whatever criminal activity was being perpetrated. In fact, what we learned from law enforcement shortly after that was that battery acid is an ingredient in meth production. I had no idea. So just an example of the kinds of nefarious activities that we have to be prepared for every day over at Pull Apart. The incentive to steal doesn't just hurt our business directly, it hurts our business indirectly. As we buy cars, which is the flow of our business, we find that we're purchasing vehicles without catalytic converters, without other essential high value components that are coming in. And what's happening is the haulers, the tow truck drivers, the auctioneers, the sites that are selling these cars, they're also becoming victim to the foul play. And so folks are coming in and stealing from them, hurting their bottom line, and the tertiary effect is hitting everybody on down the line. So it is it's not solely directed at auto recyclers. And I think what we're going to hear today, and I believe what I hope we hear today, is that it's a widespread issue that's costing a lot of folks a lot of money. Now, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars annually to try to protect ourselves and prevent theft. We have 360-degree PTZ cameras in all of our yards around the country. We've got thermal cameras in some of our yards. In fact, every night, our security team lets us know that we've got a whole bunch of coyotes running around the place, and right behind them, the crooks are running around the place. Just about every single night, they're all running around together, causing trouble. The coyotes and the crooks are finding ways through our metal fencing. They're finding ways through our electric fencing, and they're all getting in there and messing the place up. So we don't mind spending the money. In fact, I want to rephrase that. We're excited to spend the money. That's the cost of doing business, and we accept that cost of doing business. Doesn't give us heartburn. What does give us heartburn, though, is what we witness with our law enforcement partners. We consider ourselves, and I think most in our industry will tell you this, we consider ourselves partners with law enforcement. Law enforcement spends time on our facilities all over the country, using our facilities for training opportunities, using the vehicles that we have in the yards to train. We provide commodities that they can use in sting operations. We provide information when the time is appropriate to law enforcement to help them crack down on the bad actors in our industry. So we consider ourselves partners with law enforcement, and what we see is law enforcement stretched awfully thin, and their bandwidth is stretched to the max. So we get a break-in, our security team makes the call. Law enforcement has to dispatch a vehicle, dispatch a patrolman, takes him off his regular route, stretches resources even further. And so it's clear to us that law enforcement wants to crack down, wants to make a difference, wants to put a stop to it, but needs more help. And that's part of what brings us to the table today, to try to help our partners over there find resources that can help them be successful. Again, we do consider ourselves partners in law enforcement. In fact, when we look at our industry and our entity, what we believe is that we're the legal, transparent, ethical, and environmentally responsible alternative to the chop shops and the landfills. So it's a partnership that is that's important to our community, and from a recycling perspective, from a affordable car parts perspective. So we're excited to do that work, but we need help. I don't know what the solutions are, but I do know that our conviction is real, that our commitment to finding a solution and being a partner in the effort is real. The issue of vehicle crimes, the increase in vehicle crimes affects our bottom line at Pull Apart. It affects the industry. It affects their bottom line, which at the end of the day affects the ability for the recycling industry to do the real work that's necessary, which is to maintain to help reduce that footprint, reduce landfills, and keep that supply chain in working order. We don't have all the answers to Pull Apart, but we do have stores across the country. So we have seen areas around the country where we operate, where they have brought good ideas to bear, and they have implemented measures in states that have had a positive impact on reducing vehicle crimes. Certainly, they would be a value add to any discussion that we have here in Georgia. Steve Levitan, who is my colleague here at Pull Apart, is going to testify later today. And Steve is got extensive knowledge on many of these plans that have been rolled out in different communities and different agencies. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say. And I think his national perspective is going to really be beneficial. That's really all I have to add. I want to thank the chairman again. I want to thank the committee again. And I also want to thank all of the folks who showed up to testify before this committee today. I've looked at the list, and I think that it's going to be a fascinating dynamic. I think what we learn is going to be a little scary when we see the real magnitude of vehicle crimes in Georgia and how far reaching this crime really is. But, I believe that's going to help us see clearly how best to move forward. So again, my name is Derek Corbett. I'm glad to be here. Any questions you have, I'm happy to answer to the best of my knowledge. What I cannot answer, I'll kick over to somebody else.
We got some questions for you here.
Thank you.
First of all, let's see here. Chairman Corbett.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek.
Yes,
And I like your last name. It's a good last name. He was not at the family reunions. I'm this year, so. But no, I appreciate your testimony. And I guess my question on the catalytic converters, what are they doing? Where are they selling? Where are they disposing of the catalytic converters? I understand the battery acid, what they're doing there, but what about the catalytic converters? Who's purchasing those?
Well, the answer varies, but in the end, the catalytic converter really can't be rebuilt. So it can't be sold as a used car part unless it is sold through proper US EPA standards. So at the scrap buyer is where it has its real value. So if you go on Facebook Marketplace, if you find any of these online marketplaces and type in catalytic converter, you're going to see ads all over the place of folks who'll buy them from you. Now, most of these folks who you see these ads from are bad actors. They're not legitimate recyclers. They aren't folks in the industry who are out there trying to do it the right way. Georgia has fantastic scrap metal laws, but there's still folks, as in every industry, who find ways around them and are bad actors. And so that is where the value is. That's where the black market for these catalytic converters is. And eventually they make their way back into the legitimate supply chain and go to a recycler somewhere.
All right. I have a couple of questions. How many locations y'all got in Georgia?
4. We've
Where
got
are they located?
one in Augusta, one in Conley, one in Stonecrest, and one in Norcross.
Okay. And so y'all hadn't had a problem really with police coming out. It's just their hands are tied or they're not staffed or anything like that. I mean, they're coming out and doing their job.
100%.
Okay.
100%. And in fact, sadly, they've got our address right there on the top of their list.
Okay. And you're talking about like they're selling on the black market to scrap buyers, because I know like you talked about, we got laws where if you go scrap buyer, you got to have your license, and I don't even think anybody gives cash anymore. I think now they have to do a check. So what it's doing is they're ultimately selling to individuals, then they're forwarding them out to somebody else, and eventually it's working down to there, and then it's probably the money's coming back up through. Is that kind of what
That's
y'all
100%
suspect?
it.
Okay.
And you've nailed it. In fact, Georgia has the best scrap metal laws on the books. As you look at what's happening across the country, there's more than 30 different pieces of catalytic converter legislation moving through state legislatures. Almost, well, let me rephrase that. All of the good ones are framed in some shape or form after the state of Georgia scrap metal laws. Tennessee has just passed really good, strong legislation. North Carolina. So that is a piece of the component, the solution component. And the other piece, I think, has to be giving law enforcement the tools they need to adjudicate those crimes, those scrap metal crimes.
Is there any states that I guess neighbor us that their scrap metal laws where they would be beneficial to take them over to, say, Alabama or Florida or South Carolina?
Absolutely. Alabama is a great example. They actually had introduced at the end of their session last year a catalytic converter theft law. It did not pass, which was okay because it was the beginning of the idea. And in fact, myself and Steve Levitan, who you hear from here in a little bit, and others in the recycling industry are working with the legislatures over there now to craft it and have it introduced again in January. So they will, I believe, in the next session, bolster their scrap metal laws.
Okay.
And that's going to be a value add for them. Tennessee just did it. North Carolina just did it. South Carolina just did it. So I don't know what Florida's up to.
Okay.
I try not to look south.
All right. Well, we thank you, and I'm sure we'll probably have to have you back for some more questions here as we get going.
Hey, just promise to take it easy on me. I
All
thank
right.
you all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again for your service.
All right. So next on the agenda is Michael O'Connor, Deputy Chief for the Atlanta Police Department. Is he on Zoom? Okay, he's on Zoom. Oh, it even says that right out here if I read right. All right. Mr. O'Connor, are you with us?
I am. I'm adjusting the camera. I didn't realize it was going to show you my refrigerator. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I popped a fever last night, and I was worried that, with COVID, I'll go get a test, and we'll see where we're at.
Well, we hope it comes up negative there, but appreciate you keeping us in mind. But we just heard from Mr. Corbett. So if you want to kind of tell us go ahead with your presentation, we're ready for you.
So I'm going to talk more broadly than he did because that's just one aspect of the vehicle crime problem, obviously, is the recycling stuff. To give you a perspective, I've got the numbers from Atlanta specifically. So this year alone, we've had 149 vehicles carjacked. We've had 2,304 vehicles stolen. That's roughly 61% of those vehicles had the keys with them, and maybe a little higher. The reporting is not always completely accurate on that aspect. And we've had 6,077 vehicles broken into. So the scope of the vehicle crime problem in the city of Atlanta is pretty serious, but it's also serious metro-wide because we see these groups not only target folks in the city limits, but obviously in the metro counties all over. So if you got a series of police chiefs in here, I think you would get a very similar problem in all our neighboring jurisdictions. Another interesting fact, and I learned this when I was at IATI, I serve on the leadership committee for the International Association of Auto Theft Investigators. I serve on the vehicle crimes committee for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and I'm also on the Carfax Advisory Board. And one of the facts that came out at IATI this year is that more than 80% of people arrested for an auto theft are also charged with a non-associated felony, which tells you that people in stolen cars are, oftentimes up to no good in more ways than one. Here in the metro area, and I think you can see it on the news if you just watch it at home, you've seen a number of car break-ins gone wrong where things have escalated. A fair number of people that were breaking into cars now seem to be armed, creating more dangerous conditions. And we always believe that somebody who has stolen a car and is riding around in a stolen car is armed. So all of those associated issues that we're working, and they're all great challenges. And I'm here to testify that resources are needed to address this problem. So I know that there's been some probably discussion around this, but creating an auto crimes prevention authority. I know I talked to Mr. Levitan about it several times, but nationally, there's a fair number of these in other states, particularly along the Eastern Coast, the Midwest, and the West. And I know that we've had discussion previously about maybe going in that direction. I just wanted to let you know that, we are very supportive of the idea because we believe that it will help us centralize some of the intelligence around professional auto thieves and people that are stealing vehicles for profit. Cars get stolen for a number of reasons, as you probably know. One of the most common ones is the one everyone thinks of, which is for transportation purposes. And those are the ones that get recovered because those people aren't trying to steal a car for profit. But the ones that are much more challenging are the ones described by the person who went before me, which is recycling thefts, because generally, if they steal a car to recycle it, the car gets destroyed at the recycler, obviously. Then we have rental thefts, which are a big problem. The rental car companies, people will come in with fraudulent credit cards or paperwork or identification, rent a car, and then never, with no intention of returning it. Those can either be VIN flips or revins, or we've even seen some of those vehicles go into containers for shipment overseas. Another issue is just people stealing the cars, like organized gangs or professional thieves, and then just revinning them and selling them for, considerable profit. I know when I ran our auto theft unit, we saw this as a pretty significant problem. We had one gentleman, and it was unusual in the sense of that the cars were inexpensive, but he was stealing older model Honda Accords and Toyota Camrys. And revinning them and then selling them to unsuspecting buyers on the internet for about $2,500 to $3,000. When we did the search warrant at his apartment, we found paperwork for 90 plus vehicles. And they were scattered all over the metro area. So it was considerably profitable for him to do this. That just kind of gives you an idea of the scope of the problem. The resources that are needed to solve this, like I said, I think would best be organized if we could have organized auto theft teams that are regional a little bit. So that's the theory behind starting an auto crimes prevention authority, is you would have more regionalized teams that could work on the problem together. I tried to create that when I was the auto theft commander, but it's hard to get people to give up resources for free. In this case, there would be a funding source to do it. And so people would be more likely to participate in these types of teams because of the funding. And I say that because the intelligence around auto theft is only shared if the investigators talk to each other. So if Atlanta is talking to Dekalb or Cobb or Gwinnett or even Forsyth or Clayton, it's kind of done on an individual basis. But if we could create regional teams, we could have auto theft intelligence analysts that are tracking the information real time, disseminating it throughout the metro, and then everybody's kind of working on from the same template. There's probably a dozen other things I could say, but at the end of the day, I've kind of given you the scope of the problem and what we think a potential solution looks like. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, I've got some. So on the Organized Theft Prevention Authority, does that set up a type of database that everybody could see? Like you were talking about, like if DeKalb and Atlanta don't talk to each other, is there not a database in there that shows like every car that's stolen? Does it not load in real time? If y'all pull a VIN number, it shows it's stolen?
So there are some databases that'll show that the vehicle's stolen, obviously. So we don't have any problem obtaining that information. There's federal databases that do that, and then there's a state GCIC system.
Okay, so what would this theft prevention authority, how would that work?
So the concept behind that in other states is that you use intel analysts, much like GSAC does for other types of homeland security issues, or probably they've even worked that over to their gang problem. This would be more along the lines of, we see gang X doing these types of crimes, and these are the identified people that may be doing them. We need to start tracking them.
Okay, what was the funding source? Tell me how that works.
It varies state by state. So I'm aware of 3 different types of funding sources based on conversations I've had with my partners in other states. And they all work like this. One is, if you fail to renew your insurance and there's a penalty for reacquiring it once you've let it expire, they tack on a fee to reacquiring your insurance. The next one is they just do a straight like dollar fee for renewing your insurance. And the final one is they do like a dollar fee when you renew your registration. And so that's how they fund it in the other states.
And that's statewide, not just citywide, right?
Yeah, that would be statewide, because you will want to put teams in more than one place in the state. Obviously, Metro Atlanta is a big concern, but places like Augusta, Albany, Macon, Savannah, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, and right now, as of today, how short are y'all still on police officers?
I don't have the exact number. We are several hundred officers short.
Okay. All right. Chairman Corbett's got a question for you.
Thank you, Chief O'Connor. My question, you mentioned other states several times. Can you tell us just a few of those states when we possibly could follow up with that?
So the person who chairs my committee for the vehicle crimes at IACP is the state coordinator for Maryland. So that's one of the examples. There's another member of my committee from Colorado where they do the same thing. There's also a member of my committee from Texas where they do the same thing. I can give you more examples if you want them. There's somebody on there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Chief. You mentioned GSACs. Those of us that's been involved in public safety for years, we know what GSACs is. We know what they do, where a lot of people don't. They control the database of all crime reports statewide. Now, if whether you're in Hartwell or Atlanta or wherever you may be in the state of Georgia, if a local agency reports an auto theft, and usually they would have that information if the owner of that vehicle's got it, would that not be relatively easy to have a database on a daily basis created by GSACs and made available to law enforcement agencies downstream?
And that may be a route that we go in. GSAC's purpose hasn't been around property crime traditionally, but that's not a conversation I've had with Director Reynolds, but they may be more than willing to support something along those lines.
GSACs, well, you're partially true on property crimes, but they analyze every police report done on a daily basis to cross-reference it to gang violence, to international crime and things like that.
Right. I'm aware that they do that, but I was talking about something more specific to just auto theft offenders that may not have those types of ties.
Last question. Do you think that a lot of the auto theft is related to gangs or to a gang effort?
Because we don't track that in an organized fashion, it's hard to say. Anecdotally, we are seeing a significant increase in gang activity around vehicle crimes in general, both auto larcenies and auto thefts.
Thanks.
Thank you again, Chief. One more question. Do they have the number, how many of these are getting out on signature bonds and how many are repeat offenders?
So we have a repeat offender tracking unit, and we're trying to get those numbers up to date. The number is, I can tell you it's considerable, but I can't give you an exact number. It is a real problem.
Thank you.
one question I've got, we had back in September and actually have, one of our representatives here that was victim to it. 21 cars broke into, at one facility, just busted the windows out. And that, and if you don't mind, I'd like to give him just a minute, kind of give you, I know y'all are doing as much as you can and y'all are shorthanded, and this was back in 2019. But I kind of want everybody to kind of hear kind of how, what happened once everything was broke into, and kind of where we seen some lacking on law enforcement, just a little bit on his experience, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. Well, I'll start by saying that this is not an opportunity to complain about what law enforcement tried to do. But I did think that it was odd that on that particular afternoon, within just about a 15 or 20-minute period, there was 20 different automobiles with windows busted out. And the extent of the report that they made was a piece of paper that had some information on it. And that piece of paper was handed to me. And I said, I asked the officer, I said, well, where's your copy? He says, well, I don't get a copy. You take this, give this to your insurance company, and you will, handle that. And I said, well, how are we going to investigate this? So the next day, I started sort of my own little investigation. I contacted the facility where the vehicles were parked in the parking deck. And the tenant there said, yeah, we've got the security footage. Nobody ever followed up with an investigation at all. I'm not sure how they would have followed up, because I had the only piece of paper with the information about my vehicle on it. And some of our other friends that were at this event, whose vehicles were broken into, said the same thing. So I asked the tenant, did anybody come by to try to get the footage? They said, no, not to my knowledge. No one has come to retrieve this footage. The automobile that the people got out of busted my window, got my briefcase, laptop, all of my documents and stuff in my briefcase. And so when Chairman Ridley and Chairman Corbett asked me about maybe sharing a few minutes about that, my concern really is that there's so many other high priority crimes happening in and around these metro areas and in other parts of the state, that there's not enough time or resources or staff to look at somebody busting a window and grabbing a briefcase. They're out looking for what we would consider to be really bad crimes. And I even reached out to I think the station or the division was like number 5 or something. I reached out locally. There was no investigator assigned to it. And so, I don't know what you would be allowed to share in that regard, but what is the process of someone reporting a vehicle that either has the catalytic converter or something broken and stolen out of it? What is the investigation that follows that up to try to catch? If there was 21 vehicles broken into and nobody went and looked at security camera footage, nobody had a copy of a piece of paper that had my tag number, my name, my information on it, nobody ever called me to follow up with an investigation. I think you can call this legislation anything you want to, a catalytic converter crime, but it's still just a crime. And who's investigating that and following up on it?
So what happened to you is a complete abject failure on our part, and that is not the process that is supposed to be adhered to. So I don't know if you just caught the wrong individual officer. If you'll send me the case number that you were provided afterwards, I'll research it to see what was done. But this is what should have happened when you reported this crime. One, an actual police report should have been completed. So if there isn't one, that's a problem right there. That happens in all crimes. Doesn't matter whether they're property crimes, violent crimes, makes no difference. Step 2 would have been to fingerprint all of the vehicles. We do require that. It's supposed to happen. That's how we get investigative leads in many of these auto crimes. And so those vehicles should have been dusted for print. After that at the time, it would have gone to an investigator in Zone 5. Today, we have a theft from auto investigative unit because we've re-centralized. At the time, we were decentralized. And you should have been contacted by an investigator for follow-up, at which time you could say, did you review the security camera footage, which is normal. So they should have gone out and pulled the video and had a look at it and at least gone through all the appropriate investigative steps. If they weren't able to identify somebody, that's fine, but they need to at least follow the processes that would give them a chance to do so. So it sounds like nothing that was supposed to happen happened in your case. I have no idea why, but if you'll send me the case number and the date and time, I'll have somebody look into it and get back to you.
Thank you very much. Like I say, we're big supporters of y'all's and of all law enforcement. And we just kind of, as we was going through this, we kind of got discussing this right here. And I was like, well, where was the investigator at? And
No, we shoot ourselves in the foot when we don't do the right thing. So, I mean, it really does us no one likes it when someone who's supposed to do something goes up and does the opposite. It just gives us a black eye. So this is just another black eye where we didn't do what we were supposed to do. And if you'll send me the information, I'll look into it and see what we can do.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chief. I don't think we got any more questions for you. Sure appreciate your time and hope you get feeling better.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we got to get set up for our next one, and so it's going to take just a couple of minutes. No, it'll take a couple of minutes. I'm going to take a couple of minutes. All right. We got everything ready to go now. Let's see here. All right. And y'all, I know everybody's got lunch plans and other stuff to be too. So what we're going to do is just try to, if somebody's already talked about something, just try to skip over it just for time's sake right now. And not saying cut off anything that you want to say, just if somebody's already talked about it, just, we already know that's the issue and we got it down. So let's move on to the next thing.
Okay.
So next we got Terry Blackner. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
With the Director of Criminal Investigation Division from the Department of Insurance.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members for having me. I was asked to do some statistics for motor vehicle crimes, not only in Georgia, but nationally. A little bit about our office. I've got 33 years in law enforcement. Our office, a lot of people don't know about, but when Insurance Commissioner John King took over, he has a law enforcement background as well, but we have 40+ professionals dedicated to the investigation of insurance fraud and related crimes. All of our law enforcement special agents come with a high expertise in major crimes, white-collar crimes, and insurance fraud. We also have another unit under my umbrella, which is compliance. And what we do under that is administrative investigations related to bad actor insurance agents and public adjusters. all of them which are licensed from our office. So we investigate several different types of insurance, illegal insurance activities, some with companies and agents, and some with individuals. A lot of these revolve around automobiles, storm scams, and healthcare. We receive about 8,000 to 10,000 complaints annually. Not all of it is fraud, but unfortunately, a lot of it is. And we also work in close cooperation with the insurance industry, local, state, and federal partners to not only aggressively pursue these investigations, but also to see them through prosecution and adjudication. And again, like I said, if we have bad actor insurance agents or public adjusters, then we can take their license. Anything from suspended or revocation, if they've been arrested, more than likely they're going to get their license revoked. So some of the insurance claims that we see revolving around stolen vehicles is a suspect will rent a vehicle, they get insurance on the vehicle, then they file a stolen vehicle report, and then return the vehicle to the dealership without a police report, and then they usually can get a claim paid out on that. Also, suspects will get insurance on non-running vehicles, file a stolen vehicle claim with the insurance company without a police report, and get a payout. They can, this one unfortunately is pretty common. They'll get a personal vehicle, they'll put it up, take it somewhere, set it on fire, and then file a stolen vehicle report and a claim on that. They'll also use random vehicles, VINs, the vehicle identification numbers, get insurance on that. So your car could be sitting in a parking lot somewhere. They get the VIN, they go get insurance on it, they run it, everything. They'll get a similar make or model of vehicle. And then they'll file a suspect stolen vehicle claim on it, and then they'll try to get a payout on it. So I want to give everyone some fast facts. These are national facts. My sources are the National Insurance Crime Bureau, and I think they're testifying today as well. And another reputable source, which is the Insurance Information Institute. The FBI identifies the theft and attempted theft of autos as anything related to motor vehicles, trucks, buses, motorcycles, scooters, and other vehicles. An interesting fact, in 2019, $6.4 billion was lost to motor vehicle thefts. Average dollar loss per vehicle is just under $9,000. About one auto theft occurs every 7.2 minutes, and nationally 200 auto thefts a day occur. Motor vehicles are stolen usually at the rate of about 220 per 100,000 population. In Georgia last year, it was running around 223. So the trend has been since 1991 that it's trended downwards actually for motor vehicle theft. Now, the reasoning everybody thinks it trended downward over the last 2 decades is for the increased technology with the vehicles. You got security alarms, you got anti-theft devices, GPS and things like that. And also to the chief's comments, law enforcement developed nationally resources to target such crimes. So then over the last few years, there was a steady increase from the previous years. And then suddenly in 2020, it jumped up 9.2% nationally. NICB contributes the factors to this, to the pandemic, economic downturn, loss of juvenile outreach programs, which was also correlated to the pandemic, public safety budgetary cuts, and resource limitations. So to my point on this slide, if you look, just taking the last decade as a snapshot, in 2010, about 775,000 nationally were stolen. Then you saw an increase, 2016, 17, and 18, had a dip in 19, and then nationally in 2020, we're at 873. So where does that put Georgia? So the latest statistics that I could find for was 2019, and currently Georgia ranks as number 5 of the top 10 states with the most motor vehicle thefts. Now, interestingly enough, even though the increase in 2020 was 9.2%, Georgia was only one of 11 states that had a slight decline, and I'll show you that on that slide. So if you look at Georgia's 3-year snapshot, you have roughly 28,000 in 2018, just under 27,000 in 2019, and just hovering around 26,000 in 2020. So if you take NCIC's map and what NICB did, is instead of just using FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting, which is UCRs, they actually took it off of the National Crime Information Center. So every time a vehicle is stolen, it has to be reported through NCIC. So usually the NCIC statistics are going to be a little bit more accurate than UCR because not everybody reports UCR. But if you look at the graphic, Georgia is not in the top, but they're just hovering below. And of course, nobody can touch California. They're in 100,000 plus stolen vehicles per year. Now, even though Georgia has a significant amount according to other states and they're ranked as 5, we actually have a very good recovery rate. So if you look in that same 3-year snapshot of what our thefts were, if you look at the recovery rate, the national average is 57%, but we're running higher than that. Now, if you look at those 3 years, there's a slight decline. So in talking with my partners at NICB, one of the things that they are attributing to that is that it might represent, criminal activity versus just your typical kids, joy riders, opportunistic thefts and things like that. So it's something to pay attention to. Anybody have a Ford F-150 pickup in here? Okay, well, yes, sir. Well, was it stolen? So this is NICB's 2019 Hot Wheels report. If you see Ford pickup full size is the most stolen vehicle. In my 3+ decades of law enforcement, Honda Civic has always been up there. They are, for whatever reason, bad guys like to steal Civics, but that's the latest report on the top vehicles. All right, so I think this would be some interesting information for the committee. This is your different district and representative areas, your metropolis areas. And I wanted to continue with that 3-year snapshot of what the thefts look like and then what the ranking is. Now, to be clear, this is national. So these rankings in 2020 that you see, for example, Macon-Bibb County is ranked number 71. That's out of 360 cities nationally. Now, to be Hinesville at 314 is good, right? Because that means that they have very little, but they're also by population a smaller area. If you look at the metropolitan area of Atlanta, Sandy Springs, Alpharetta, they have a lot, but the biggest picture on those 3, you can see that there has been a very slight decline over the 3 years. Again, understanding that nationally it went up 9.2% in 2020. And their rankings also have done some better. But again, I can't stress enough that even though, say, Columbus is ranked at 89, that's 89 of 360 cities throughout the country for how many motor vehicle thefts they have. But there has been a trend to where it's been stabilized and their rankings over the last 3 years have went better. So like I said before, on the last 2 decades for the decline in motor vehicle thefts, partly due or a lot attributed to an increase in technology, right? The anti-theft devices, GPS and all of that. Well, bad guys are getting smarter. So every time we do better technology or the industry does better technology, bad guys learn more sophisticated ways. One thing that they've done, instead of the traditional forced entry of vehicles, hot wiring cars, they now are able to acquire smart keys. They can clone it. It's like a little computer in your pocket. They can switch vehicle identification numbers. They can clone them. And cloning is simply taking a legitimate vehicle in a dealership somewhere, making a duplicate of it, putting it on another vehicle of like make, year, make and model, and then selling it or making an insurance claim against it and claiming that it's been stolen. But there's a statistic I want everybody to be aware of too, with the key fobs and the keys. 56% over the last year of the vehicle thefts had to do with people leaving their keys and their key fobs in their car. And that's how the slider crimes, if you've ever heard of that, where people go to the gas station, they go out simply just to pump gas. And then they don't lock their car. They leave their key fob in the car. They get in the car and they drive off with their vehicle. A lot of times while the pump is still in the vehicle getting gas on it. But I wanted to share an article from Fox 5 in regards to City of Atlanta. And just to tell you, emphasize the key fobs and leaving keys in vehicles. So police said last week in December, that would have been December of 2020, 80% of all stolen cars were either left running or left without car, or left with car keys inside. There's been a 40% increase in car thefts that particular year, which was 2020. And of those, 67% of them were because the driver left the car running or with the keys inside. So part of that is education. We have to do a better job. Law enforcement has to do a better job of educating the citizens for situational awareness and do their things that they can help to prevent and make themselves a harder target for the thieves. A lot of my previous presenters have talked about catalytic converter thefts. Well, you can see that they've grown fourfold in 2020. And the reason is because of the amount of precious metal prices. So a lot of the catalytic converters are coated with things like platinum and palladium. Well, palladium is running $2,300 an ounce right now, which is greater than gold. Platinum is running about $1,100 an ounce. So it takes a lot of catalytic converters to get an ounce of platinum or palladium. So that's why you'll see Joe C. Bad Guy driving down the road with 50 to 100 catalytic converters so they can go to some recycle place. But to the representative from Pull Apart's point, Georgia does have some great laws, and a lot of times reputable recycle companies will not take these. So they're doing it on the either the dark web or some other black market to be able to sell these. But if they get enough of them, it's pretty lucrative, right? So it's palladium is more than gold. So it just takes a lot of them to get there. But the average cost for a consumer to replace said catalytic converter is about $3,000. So it costs the consumer a lot. So just to wrap up, the current trends, of course, is the continued motor vehicle vulnerable parts such as catalytic converters because of the precious metals. There is a rise of credit fraud related to motor vehicle theft. Sometimes they can go into dealerships, have fake identities, fill out all the information, drive off in the vehicle, and there's no way to track them down from that point on. And also we see a rise in insurance fraud related to motor vehicles as well. And then how it affects your insurance, a lot of us that have full policies, it falls under comprehensive. Comprehensive has to do with somebody damaging your car, forcible entry to your car, or stealing your car. So as the increase in crimes, people file more claims on their comprehensive, and then what that results in is increased premiums for all of us. So with that, I thank y'all for allowing me to present this, and I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anybody has any questions. Thank you for your time, and this has been pretty informative. I know the reason Dodges are, yes.
Yes,
And I know
sir.
the reason Dodges are number 8 because none of the key fobs ever work. I got one. I go through about 2 a year. But thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. I do have copies.
All right,
and I
next,
can send it to you.
we got Joe Cook, Vice President of Government Relations for U-Haul International, and he'll be on our Zoom. Mr. Cook, are you there with us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. I
All
think
right, you're up.
My screen is still showing the last presentation.
Oh, we got to hang on. It'll take just a second for her to take that off. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. Greetings from Phoenix, Arizona. My apologies for not being with you today, and thank you for allowing me to do this virtually. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Joe Cook. I'm Vice President of Government Relations for U-Haul International. U-Haul is North America's largest do-it-yourself moving and storage operator. You may have seen our distinctive orange and white U-Haul trucks and trailers on your roadways there in the state of Georgia. My testimony today is in support of increasing resources for the enforcement of laws related to the many categories of vehicle crimes. One approach that has been successful that we've heard about today is the Vehicle Crime Prevention Authority to combat motor vehicle crimes through enforcement, prevention, and education initiatives, an idea that I'm sure you will hear more about throughout the day. I would like to just share some impact motor vehicle crimes have had on U-Haul as far as parts theft, stolen rental vehicles, and insurance fraud that have had on our fleet in the state of Georgia and across the U.S. Catalytic converter theft, I'll start with. The state of Georgia accounts for the 4th highest number of catalytic converter thefts on U-Haul rental vehicles across the 50 states and 10 Canadian provinces in which we operate. Texas, California, and Ohio are the only others that are ahead. In 2021 of August, there was 114 catalytic converter thefts recorded by U-Haul repair facilities in the state of Georgia. Over the past 12 months, we've had 1,043 catalytic converter theft incident repairs recorded in Georgia at an average cost of $613 per repair. The total cost of U-Haul has been nearly $640,000. It's important to note that the $613 average cost of catalytic converter labor and the average cost of catalytic converter parts alone, there are associated repair expenses that are not captured in this figure, such as towing, oxygen sensors, security cages, and other exhaust system parts and labor. Nearly $1 million has been lost in the state of Georgia due to catalytic converter theft in the past 40 months. Since January 2021, the average theft amount per month comes to $61,760. Nationally, over the past 12 months, U-Haul has documented 18,997 catalytic converter theft repair incidents. Catalytic converter theft has become a tremendous burden on U-Haul nationwide and in the state of Georgia. Catalytic converter theft has been much worse since the start of COVID, costing the U-Haul system millions of dollars per year. In the state of Georgia, U-Haul has suffered about $2,000 a day in catalytic converter theft just in 2021. The theft problem shows no signs of abating anytime soon. Second category I'd like to talk about briefly is rental vehicles stolen off our lots. Over the last 52 weeks, we've had 109 rental vehicles stolen off our rental facility lots in the state of Georgia. This ranks the state of Georgia as the 5th highest number of U-Haul rental vehicles stolen off lot out of the 50 US states and 10 Canadian provinces. The repair on the recovered stolen vehicles was nearly $200,000, while 6 rental vehicles had to be completely scrapped for a loss of approximately $170,000. 25 of the stolen rental vehicles have yet to be recovered. If unrecoverable, the potential loss for those 25 vehicles totals $1.1 million. Nationally, over the last 52 weeks, U-Haul has had 3,221 rental vehicles stolen off lot from our rental facilities across the US and Canada. The last category I'd like to touch on is rental vehicle insurance fraud. In the past 5 years, we've had 261 claims, 36 in 2021 in the state of Georgia that we have referred to the National Insurance Crime Bureau. We only refer claims to the NICB when we are positive there is fraud. The only type of fraud we investigate is staged accidents. Georgia is our 3rd highest state for costs related to fraudulent claims behind California and Florida. Typically, those committing vehicle fraud will use our rental vehicle to crash into either an older model vehicle with passengers or a newer model high-end luxury vehicle. The most common claim is injury to the passengers. Of the 261 claims, we were able to get 84 confessions and 284 claimant withdrawals. There could be more than one person per claim. Those 261 claims alone cost the company $3.5 million in payment and expense. Keep in mind, we can't prove them all out as fraud, so that's why we end up paying some portion of the claim. Nationally, over the past 5 years, we've had 3,356 claims in the US that were referred to NICB. Of those claims, we were able to get 879 confessions and 6,652 claimant withdrawals. Those 3,000 claims cost the company $45 million in claim payments and expense. Mr. Chairman and esteemed committee members, I sincerely hope that you will recognize the negative impact vehicle crimes in the state of Georgia are having on a large fleet operator like U-Haul. I respectfully ask that you consider this impact as you review potential approaches to aid Georgia's law enforcement agencies in their efforts to combat all these various types of motor vehicle crimes, including potentially the need for a vehicle crime prevention authority in the state of Georgia. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today.
Well, thank you for all your information. Right now, we don't have any questions for you. And if we do, are you going to stay online, or are you good with everything? Mr. Cook, are you going to stay on there with us just in case?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll stay on the line.
Okay. All right. We don't have any questions right now, but we may have some here in a few minutes. But thank you for your information. All right. Next, Scott Enos, Vice President. I don't know how to pronounce this. I know how I want to say it, but I don't need to say it like that. My chairman over here has messed me up this morning. Now, y'all with Enterprise Holdings, is that the rental company? Yeah. Okay. All right, go ahead and state your name and all your.
My name is Scott Ennis, Vice President for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I'm in charge of the finances for our group here in Georgia. I'm a resident of the city. I've been living in Georgia now for 3 years. We have approximately 12 to 1,300 employees here in the perimeter Atlanta area. We operate about 120 locations. That's home city and our airport operations. We also have the brands of Enterprise, Alamo National. We have car sale locations in 3 different parts around Atlanta. And we have 8 truck rental locations throughout the Atlanta metro area as well. So I have to say today, from what I heard is, wow, it's on point of what we need here in the state and the city to help address this problem. One of my responsibilities is overseeing our risk management department. I have Harshita here, who is our manager in that particular area of our business. So she's going to provide you guys with some facts on our losses that we've suffered over the past year in this particular area. But this is a true issue. I thank you for looking into this and having this subcommittee meeting now, because it's something that we do need to address here in the state to get something in play to help us out. But Harshita has some facts that she'll share with you on our business.
Hi, I'm Harshita Davis. I'm the group risk manager for the Atlanta metro area. I've been here in Atlanta for just over 2 years, but I've worked with the company for 20 years. I've worked in different markets across the country, North Carolina, Chicago, Southwest Florida, and now Atlanta. I do have some information that I want to first share with you. When I started, it was right before COVID hit, and we always have had a car theft issue at Enterprise, right? Or in the rental car world, but it has significantly increased post-COVID and during COVID. Also, I think some other factors that have caused it to increase is, there is a shortage of vehicles out there, and there's also a high demand for vehicles, right? Because of the shortage. So, just for some dollar amounts, the 3 different types of categories we typically, or 4 different types of categories where we typically experience theft is we have thefts from renters. So, we've got where folks are renting a vehicle from us and they have the vehicle stolen while it's on rent to them. We also have situations where we call them conversions, so theft by conversion, where a person is renting a vehicle from us and ultimately decides to convert it into their own property. And, we have to then go through a whole legal process to get those vehicles back. We have fraudulent rentals, that was spoken to or earlier, where folks are coming in with fake information, whether it's a fraudulent credit card, fraudulent identity, and they're obtaining our vehicles through fraudulent ways. So we have those scenarios as well. And then we also have unaccounted theft is how we term it, but it's essentially theft where we have vehicles missing off our lots, or vehicles that are legitimately just stolen off the lot, or, in a situation where it's not actually on a rental contract. And just also to note, Enterprise is a self-insured company in Georgia, but also mostly across the company or the country. And so all of this expense is, directly out of our income. It impacts our individual branches' profits, which impacts our individual employees' pay. And so, we ran some numbers from January 2020, which is right before COVID, and then through August, and we've had over $7.5 million with these different types of incidents. We've experienced $7.5 million in losses. So, that's a combination of items, right? So we have a lot of recovery costs that go into that. For example, we use repossession vendors, data vendors. We also have tow companies, and all of that's looped in there. We have vehicles that are recovered with significant amounts of damages. Those conversions that I mentioned before, typically we do recover plenty of those, but most of them are damaged, sometimes up to a total loss. And then out of all of those vehicles that we had lost, we also have some that are unrecovered, which goes into that number as well. So since January of 2020, we've had over 2,000 vehicles stolen just here in Georgia. Pardon? That is a combination of all those different scenarios that I talked about. So it's a significant number. And again, it's just Georgia. So that's not company-wide. We also, out of those, we have had a very high recovery rate. We recover about 90% of those, which I will tell you is a testament to how hard we work with law enforcement and how much we support the risk department within our company and utilize as many resources as we can to help get these vehicles back. So, that's where we're at from a cost standpoint. There's also a lot of costs that go into that we can't really put a number on. Some of the things that, when we're talking about recoveries, we do a very good job of recovering the vehicles, but some of the things that's making it even harder, back when I started, early 2000s, we almost recovered everything. I mean, almost everything came back to us at some point or another. And now we have, about 10% of our vehicles that don't. And a lot of that has to do with, the vehicles being shipped off into containers, the VIN replacements that don't always come back to us. The other piece of that is the criminals are now able to identify the technology and they're able to work around it. So I know there's mention of most of the thefts are by folks leaving keys in cars. And while we do deal a lot with that, we are now dealing a lot with folks who are able to manipulate the technology in our vehicles so that they're able to actually steal a vehicle without having our keys. And there's a lot of different things that we're trying to learn still about how they're doing that. And so, it's just becoming harder and harder for us to do that.
One of the things I can talk real quick, the deputy chief talked about, teamwork between the different counties. We had a significant issue less than a year ago, box trucks ring getting stolen, and we had to work very, very hard to get all the counties to come together to help us arrest somebody. And that was a very, very strenuous process to get everybody to work together to finally get an arrest made. I know Harshita and her team worked a lot on that through our security director that's here in Atlanta. But that's a problem that we have out there. And Deputy Chief, what he commented on, he was on point today with what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. That theft ring that he's talking about was over $1 million in inventory that we had stolen over the course of a few years from one entity, one person. And it took a very long time for us to kind of uncover the facts of that. So, obviously on consumers, it has a huge impact, right? So for our consumers, they have to file claims, which is going to increase their premiums. Potentially some of these consumers are uninsured. So they may have to pay out of pocket or go into bankruptcy, or, go into litigation due to the situation that we're trying to recover costs. With that being said, too, they may never be able to rent again. And while it's not a God-given gift to be able to rent a car, some folks really depend on the transportation that our company provides for them to get to and from wherever they need to go. Customers, there's also the side of it where consumers are purchasing these vehicles that have been revinned. Not all of them are just getting great deals on Craigslist. Some of these are people who these vehicles end up in dealerships and they're purchasing them legitimately thinking that they're properly titled, and then also ultimately what everyone is probably complaining about today is the raised rental car rates, right? So that is another side effect of what happens. The impact on our insurance partners is of course the time and energy it takes for them to investigate these situations similar to us, and them increasing their premiums, of course, their resources being spread thin, working these files. And then the claims that they're paying out for their customers. The impact on the community, obviously this has already been talked to. Absolutely, the deputy sheriff was or commissioner was on point. These vehicles oftentimes are used in crimes. They're the vehicles that are used in drive-by shootings. They're the vehicles that are used in other thefts. They're the vehicles that are used to commit violent crimes. So this is an issue for our community. The more access that thieves have or criminals have to our vehicles, the more of a avenue they have to commit the crimes that they're going to commit against our community. And then the impact that it has on our company. Ultimately, I already spoke to the cost that it has on our company, but it's also a huge strain on our employees and our resources. I have a total of 9, including me, folks that work in our risk department here in Atlanta. And we are the ones primarily responsible to manage, like I just said, the last 2,000 cars that were stolen. We are working with law enforcement. We are working with our own skip tracing. We're working with repossession vendors. We spend a lot of our day chasing down cars and stolen vehicles rather than working on other things, that are more pertinent, and necessary in our roles.
And we do have a good amount of system stuff up front to help us identify fraud. So some of these cars that do get on rent, it's not they're all fraud rentals. We do a lot of work up front to try to get vehicles to the correct folks. So the cars that Harshita deals with are the thefts that are true, stolen from a customer and things of that nature.
Yeah, only out of those over 2,000 cars, only 45 of them are fraudulent, where we've identified that fake credentials were used to rent the vehicle. But another theft ring that we're currently dealing with is one where we have multiple vehicles stolen, and other car rental companies are also impacted. Six, Budget, and us are predominantly been impacted. It's an active Dekalb County theft ring. And we have identified that, folks are able to access our vehicles, potentially renting them, and then returning them, finding, putting something in the vehicle, or they're able to track it at a later time. And then they're actually returning the keys to us. So they're making their own keys somehow, or they're able to access the vehicle quickly. And the vehicles go immediately to a spot. And then that's when they take, if there's an OnStart of, if there's anything on there that can help us locate the vehicle, they're smart enough to deactivate all of that, take the plates off, and we have yet to see any of those vehicles. So we ourselves have about $300,000 in that we're working on that's unrecovered that will hit our books in September. But like I mentioned, I think Six and Budget each have about 5 to 6 cars, and these are high-end vehicles. Now, one of the things that I want to segue to now is that we broke that case within a week. We identified within some of these thefts, figured it out, right? Because of the experience that's on our team and with our company. But the unfortunate thing for law enforcement is that because they've happened in multiple jurisdictions, they can't actually crack the case because they have to have, all the pieces have to mesh. There's too many different folks working on it individually, that they're unable to really make a proper case, and we have linked this to, stuff that's happening in Alabama as well. So it is crossing state lines as well. And this is why it becomes so critical for us to have the Vehicle Crimes Authority, because it really will help. I think someone used the term central intelligence. That's absolutely what we need. That is our biggest hurdle right now with being able to crack down on these folks. And so that's why we're here really pleading for that, because we believe that will be a tremendous help to us. And we are happy to be a partner in that, and we're happy to play a huge role in that.
All right. Representative Prince, got a question?
Yeah, thank you. Do you guys ever find cars coming back on your lot, people returning them without catalytic converters or parts or and so how do you identify? Because I know most of the time when I drop off a rental car, I just drop it off and leave the keys and boom, I'm out of there. Do y'all inspect the car?
Yeah, we inspect them, and you can typically tell that a catalytic converter has been stolen. When they go to start up the vehicle, there'll be a pretty terrible noise that comes from the vehicle, or there'll be parts where you can see where they've actually cut it. We've worked in several markets. So over the years, we've been impacted by catalytic converters. Over just recently in the last year, that hasn't been as much of an impact for us. We're showing in our numbers about $25,000 in catalytic converters specifically.
So you have a process to check to make sure the vehicle is.
We have a process to check, basic things that's visual some it's not a mechanic to identify on our return process and our rental process, but like a catalytic converter coming back, if it got dropped after night, we'd have to start the car up the next day and figure out something's wrong with it. But we do have cars that get returned, and even our team will miss, something's missing in the vehicle. And then we realize that somebody stole something out of the vehicle. That happens, quite often.
Okay.
And we do have, we invest a lot in our facilities to ensure that we have good camera footage and security. There's plenty of different approaches that we take depending on the specific location that we're trying to secure.
Every one of our facilities has security system. A lot of them have live monitoring to watch if somebody comes on our lot at night. We did have a catalytic converter issue down in Morrow at one of our car sale dealerships. It must have been a year ago, but.
Chairman Corbett's got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You talked about the converting the vehicles. I understand, duplicating, cloning of the VIN number and putting it on. How about the title? Are they counterfeiting the title as well? Or are they applying to the lost title, junk title? How are they doing that?
So when I was referring to the conversion of the vehicle, it's not typically that they're converting title paperwork in that scenario. It is essentially someone who obtained the vehicle through proper means and then just not wanting to return it. So they're essentially converting it to their own. So that was my, that's kind of where that term comes from. But we do actually have situations where we have these theft rings that we're talking about. That's where they're VIN cloning or, they're flipping VINs. And we find several of our recovered vehicles, the ones that we do get back, more and more frequently, more than I've ever seen in my career, with flip VINs, which is a very long and, complicated process once we get those vehicles back.
We have had that happen before with title getting through with a change VIN, but it doesn't happen very often. But when that happens, a consumer gets caught in the middle because they think they bought a good vehicle. Then something happens and they realize that that vehicle had something done to it. But those don't happen too often.
That was one, the deputy chief, when he was talking about it was 2,300, or 20, what the number of Corollas or Camrys or whatever had been sold in Atlanta. I wonder how they were getting those titles.
So one of the things, we are big participants in GATIC, which is the Georgia Auto Theft Intelligence Council. And we recently, it was probably 6 months ago, we had several law enforcement agents from Alabama come to our meeting, and they spoke to how easy it is to get a title in Alabama. They don't really go through a verification process. And so we feel that that's why Georgia is a hot area to steal vehicles, is because it's simple to go and get a different state and get the titles based on our location.
Okay, and I've just got one question. You talked about the key fobs, and I've got a buddy that's got dealerships, and he buys a lot of vehicles from y'all, whenever y'all get ready to sell them. Where in the hell is the other key fob at? There has to be a huge box somewhere with another key fob, because everybody, every dealer I know says, oh, you only get one key fob
All
when
of
you
our
buy from
cars
Enterprise.
should come with 2 key fobs on them, but sometimes, you know, and it gets clunky in your pocket. Sometimes customers cut the cord, and we do have extras that we do send out to the dealers. but,
Every dealer I talk to, they're like, yep, the Enterprise don't got one key fob.
We can help them out with that if they have an issue with that.
Who's that? Okay, hang on just a second. We've got a comment from Deputy Chief O'Connor. All right, Mr.
Just
O'Connor,
put in
you
the
got,
chat to let you know that the vehicles, those vehicles that I was speaking about, the 99, the Hondas, he fraudulently provided title. It wasn't a legitimate title. He provided them with a fraudulent title, which is consistent with what she's saying on revend vehicles. There were 10,000 legitimate Georgia state titles stolen a number of years ago, and those continue to pop up from time to time. We see them in other states. And then the other thing we see is, she also mentioned, it's very easy to obtain title in some other states. So they'll revend a vehicle, apply for title in another state, and bring it back.
okay. Thank you, Chief, clearing that up for us. Okay, we don't have any other questions. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, see, Mr. Lynch, are you on Zoom with us?
Yeah, you got him, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lynch, are you with us now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. After I turned you on, I can. Thank you for being with us. You're with the National Insurance Crime Bureau. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be very, very brief because much of what I've was going to cover has been covered by the other testifiers today. So joining you from Chicago today, my name is Tim Lynch. I am this interim vice president of government affairs at the National Insurance Crime Bureau. Yeah, Terry and Joe covered a lot of territory that I was going to cover, so I will summarize quickly. The NICB is a national not-for-profit organization supported by about 1,200 property casualty insurance companies, including many who write business in the state of Georgia. Working with our member companies and law enforcement, we investigate organized criminal conspiracies dealing with insurance and vehicle theft. We really sit at the intersection between the insurance industry and law enforcement, helping to identify, prevent, and deter fraudulent insurance claims. Our 400 employees work with law enforcement entities, prosecutors, government agencies, and lawmakers like yourself all across the country. Simply put, we just want to offer our assistance to the subcommittee as you begin the process of combating vehicle theft in the state of Georgia. We have deep experience in vehicle theft investigations via our team of 5 agents who work and reside in Georgia. We have vast data analytic capabilities, which you've seen with some of the data shared with you today. We also have government affairs and public affairs tools, as well as a strong understanding of how states and localities across the country combat theft. I won't cover some of the things that you're seeing on the ground in Georgia. They've been very well covered by Chief O'Connor, Terry, Joe, and others. They very much mirror the same things that we are seeing in terms of the common theft schemes in Georgia. So with that, I'll submit this written record. Happy to answer any questions and be of a resource to you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for being short there with us. And I'm sure that we'll be in touch with you as well. This process goes on. I don't have any questions, so thank you, and hang in there with us. We may have something that comes up though.
Thank you.
So we have somebody from GBI here with us. Morning. Good morning.
Got some short prepared remarks for y'all, and then I'd love to take any questions y'all may have. I'd like to thank you guys for having the opportunity, first off, to appear before you today, and I applaud your commitment to the safety of the citizens of the state, as well as your support for law enforcement across the state. My name is Jared Coleman. I'm a special agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. My current assignment is with the GBI's Gang Task Force. I've been with the unit since its inception in 2019. I've had the opportunity to travel the state from the Appalachians to the Barrier Islands in pursuit of those criminal street gangs that target the citizens of our state. I've had the opportunity to provide testimony as an expert witness on criminal street gangs and gang culture on behalf of the state of Georgia, as well as the government of the United States and federal proceedings. And I've acted as a case agent as well as consultant on many large-scale criminal street gang investigations. And I say all this to say that I've had the opportunity to see the impact of criminal street gangs across the state and kind of learn the manner that they operate in, from urban communities to rural communities, okay? I've been asked to speak to you today to provide you guys a little bit of a perspective and insight on the connection between auto crimes and criminal street gangs. And so the motivation that drives these criminal organizations is the ability to acquire money, gain power within their communities, and then earn the respect of those around them, usually through fear. Now, the root of criminal gang activity is found in the ability to gain financial prowess on behalf of the gang. Within gang culture, power is determined by the amount of wealth that you're able to generate for the gang. In short, the nicer the car you drive, the larger your jewelry, the more U.S. currency that you're able to display, the more power you have within the gang community. So there's an expectation that you put in work. That's a term that's used within the gang community. And what that means is that you provide for the gang financially and you expand the gang's reputation by engaging in acts of violence against rivals, authority figures, anyone that opposes the will of the gang. And one of the critical components of that gang economy is found within the automotive world. So auto thefts represent a significant driver of criminal gang activity across the state, and they represent one of the largest components in that gang economy. Vehicle thefts have affected gang culture within the state, from simple thefts in pursuit of other crimes to being the driving crime of the gang. So a special agent within our office recently worked an investigation in North Georgia where a prospective member of the Ghostface Gangsters was specifically directed to steal a Jeep Wrangler just to gain entry as a member of the gang. That was his initiation into the gang. Now, nearly every day across the city of Atlanta, you guys have heard about these slider crimes. Many of these stolen vehicles, normally stolen by juveniles or young adults in the community here, are later found to have been utilized in drive-by shootings and homicides across the city as well as the state. Now, in one particular case I've had the opportunity to consult on involves the statewide actions of a hybrid criminal street gang called Slime Gang Young Crew, or SGYC. This is a gang that's found to engage in a pattern of crimes from entering autos and vehicle thefts to aggravated assaults and homicides. The gang's primarily composed of juveniles as young as 11 years old, as well as young adults. Now, while the majority of the members of this gang and associates are residents here in Metro Atlanta, we found crimes that they've engaged in Atlanta, South Fulton, Macon, Warner Robins, Columbus, all the way to Douglas County and Forsyth County. So we're seeing them travel across the state to engage in their crimes. Members of this gang have resorted to shooting property owners who attempt to interfere in their thefts that they're trying to engage in. These gang members have been known to utilize these stolen vehicles to commit other crimes, including other vehicle thefts, robberies, burglaries, and homicides. Attempts to conduct traffic stops on some of these vehicles that have been stolen have resulted in numerous vehicle pursuits around the states and those police jurisdictions that allow pursuits to occur. Now, these vehicle thefts are occurring not simply as a result to these non-attendant vehicles. You guys have kind of heard about some of these creative strategies that the gangs are coming up with the cloning of the keys and stuff like that. What we're finding is that these vehicles sometimes will be advertised on social media for sale anywhere between the range of $2,000 to $5,000 for purchase by other members of the gang. We're also seeing these vehicles being diverted to chop shops around the state where they're being, sold out to pull apart and all these other recycling facilities and whatnot. We've also found that some of these vehicles are doing the VIN switches, and we've traced them to ports in Savannah and Norfolk, Virginia, where they're being shipped out of the country pursuant to this international criminal commerce. So vehicles that may not be sold are typically utilized for further gang violence or otherwise abandoned. A lot of times we're finding those recovered in metropolitan Atlanta. Now, as these gang offenders continue to be arrested by law enforcement, they're learning about law enforcement techniques and some of the investigative strategies that we use through court documents and discovery packets. This has led to increasingly sophisticated operations on behalf of these gangs. And that's being driven through the policies, procedures, and practices that law enforcement is using here and now in the judicial entities where these gangs operate. I say that to say that I've had the opportunity to interview gang members that have told me that they are going to flee in a stolen vehicle from law enforcement unless they see that it's a trooper with the Georgia State Patrol. Hands down, they're going to flee because they know that the State Patrol can chase them. On the other side, I've had gang members tell me that they actively avoid jurisdictions such as the Coweta Judicial Circuit, where they know that law enforcement is going to aggressively pursue them and the local district attorney's office is going to pursue gang prosecutions against them. So this kind of demonstrates a mindset of these gang offenders when it comes to this. They're actively seeking to exploit those jurisdictions that are less likely to hold them accountable, whereas they're actively avoiding those communities where they're unwilling to allow gangs to operate within their communities. So in order to counter this increasing effect of gangs and gang violence across the state, it's incumbent on the General Assembly and this committee to pursue additional tools to give law enforcement the ability to combat this threat to safety and security of the state. Now, when the Georgia Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act was passed by the General Assembly in 1998, the law included a provision of legislative intent in the law, and that can be found in OCGA 1615-2, paragraph B, which specifically states that the General Assembly further finds that the state of Georgia is in a state of crisis, which has been caused by violent street gangs whose members threaten, terrorize, and commit a multitude of crimes against peaceful citizens of their neighborhoods. These activities, both individually and collectively, present a clear and present danger to the public order and safety and are not constitutionally protected. Now, to put that into perspective, over 10 years later, in 2009, the FBI released the National Gang Threat Assessment. Within that assessment, the FBI noted that there were approximately 1 million gang members active in the United States, belonging to over 20,000 different street gangs in all 50 states of the Union. Just 2 years later, they did another assessment in 2011 and found that gang membership had grown by 40% to 1.4 million gang members, and that criminally active gangs had grown 65% to 33,000 active gangs across the Union. A new study has not been funded by Congress since 2011, so we don't know what that looks like on the national scale. However, in 2019, the Georgia Gang Investigators Association engaged in a survey of police departments and sheriff's offices across the state. And what they found was that criminal street gangs were active in 157 of our 159 counties across the state. The police chiefs and the sheriffs said that the number one threat to the safety of their citizens was criminal street gangs. Further identified that over 71,000 gang members and associates were operating within the state of Georgia across 1,500 different gangs. Just for reference, the seating capacity at Mercedes-Benz Stadium is 71,000 people, so we could put a gang member in every seat to fill up that stadium. This is not a threat that's diminishing across our state. The threat's growing, and we're seeing it play out every day in the headlines that we see. Just this year alone, man wanted in connection for more than 70 car break-ins in Cherokee County. 3 gang members charged, 1 assault after a wild chase in Marietta. Just a couple of days ago, 3 kids wanted for murder arrested after high-speed chase in Georgia. That happened down in Glenn County, Georgia. So it's not specific just to the Atlanta area. We're seeing this across the state involving auto crimes and gang violence. Now, motor vehicles and their role within the criminal gang world, there's an undeniable link. There's a clear nexus between these types of crimes and what gangs are doing across our state. Whether the members are utilizing these thefts as a means of financial enrichment, as a mode of transportation for further crimes, or as a strategy to avoid detection and furtherance of these acts of violence against rival gang members or innocent civilians, it's apparent that this trend is going to continue and that motor vehicle theft and auto crimes are intrinsically linked to the criminal street gang world. This committee and the General Assembly has an opportunity to move forward and target these guys in one of the cogs of the gang world and have the opportunity to take these guys down. So I certainly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today, and I thank you for your continued faith and support in our combined efforts with our private partners as well as law enforcement and commitment to the citizens of the state.
Thank you for being with us. Just a couple of things. One, so you're saying no chase areas have higher crime rates? Yeah. Do you have a list of those?
I don't have a list of exactly what jurisdictions are have a particular policy of no pursuit, but I can tell you that anecdotally, in speaking with gang members, they have told me personally that if they're in those jurisdictions where they know that there's a no chase policy, they're going to run unless they see blue and gray behind them because they know that they can get away.
Yeah. It's amazing how smart you got to be to figure that out. We've noticed it here, areas too, that you just kind of see that over and over again. I mean, if I take off running, they're not going to chase me down. So, the other thing, the people with Enterprise that was talking about that the crime ring where they had like multi-districts. At what point do y'all step in?
So
You ain't push a button.
So the GBI remains a request agency.
Okay.
We don't have the authority to step in and assume any type of power other than what the legislature has granted us original jurisdiction in. So even gang crimes at this point in time, we don't have original jurisdiction. So we have to be asked to come in to assist in these types of investigations. And even then, I believe our authorized power right now is only 270 sworn agents across the state of Georgia. So our resources within the GBI investigatively is already stretched pretty thin. So we have to be fairly choosy about what we accept. And that's in addition to our duties for investigating public corruption, officer involved shootings and whatnot. So that's, we have to be asked to come in. We can't just walk in the door and say that we're assuming the investigation.
These areas where there's higher crime rates, are they more, I guess, are they more out not to ask you to come in, or are they pretty equal with everybody else when they have issues like that?
It really depends. Some places tend to welcome the GBI and their assistance in investigations. Others feel like they can handle it. So, I mean, it depends on a case by case basis. It's not really drawn along rural versus urban lines or anything like that. It's kind of on a case by case basis. We may have a very good relationship and work closely with a city police department, whereas a sheriff's office may not need our assistance.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and for your help. Thank you for what y'all do. Love your haircut. And if there's anything we can ever do, let us know.
Certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Steve Latan. Executive VP will pull apart and chair of the National Catalytic Converter Theft. You sound like you might know what you're talking about.
Hopefully. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, since I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch, I'm going to be very brief, uncharacteristically. But I am Steve Levitin. I'm the executive VP for Pull Apart. And my colleague, Derek Corbett, described the company very well earlier. I serve as chair of the National Working Group on Catalytic Converter Theft Prevention for ISRI, or the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. And I've been active in the recycling industry as a third-generation recycler in Atlanta for over 50 years now. So first, I'd like to thank Chairman Corbett, Subcommittee Chair Ridley, for holding this important hearing. And I'd like to thank Mark Carter, Regional Security Manager for Enterprise Holdings, for engaging me in a conversation about growing problems of vehicle crimes in Georgia, which both of our companies have been experiencing, and the dwindling resources available to combat these crimes. While we were both attending an International Association of Auto Theft Investigators, or IATI, seminar at which I was an instructor in 2019. As a result of those discussions, we've met with a variety of law enforcement, government, industry, stakeholders to explore these problems and identify potential solutions. Today, you've heard in detail the scope of these crimes and their impact on Georgia's citizens and businesses, from vehicle theft to catalytic converter theft, to fraud and other financial crimes, and how these crimes feed and foster various criminal enterprises such as street gangs. Georgia's laws dealing with these issues are good, and in fact have been identified by our working group as providing model language, which has now been used in catalytic converter theft legislation that's passed in several states, including North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee this year. But as you've also heard, we can certainly use some help with enforcement. Increased enforcement will require increased resources, funding, equipment, training, increased public awareness and education, specialized prosecution, and multi-jurisdictional investigation and enforcement capabilities. Based on our experience in several states in which we operate and our involvement with IATI, we've seen the benefits from the creation of vehicle crime prevention authorities. And you've heard several people talk about those today. Sometimes they're more narrowly called auto theft prevention authorities, or ATPAs. And the benefits of these authorities in providing those needed resources. Mr. Chairman, members, we would respectfully ask that this committee look into the creation of a vehicle crimes prevention authority in Georgia. Currently, there are at least 13 such authorities in the U.S., including Texas, Virginia, Maryland, Colorado, Louisiana, Arizona, and we can provide you with the full list. We stand ready to work with the committee and staff to provide any needed information on how these authorities have been created, how they are funded, as well as metrics showing their effectiveness. We've already had offers from some of these existing authorities to provide data and testimony before this committee. While realistically, we know there's no such thing as a magic bullet that's going to prevent all vehicle crimes, but we have seen demonstrated cost-effective results from these authorities around the country. Again, thank you for your attention to this growing threat posed by vehicle crimes in Georgia and the ongoing and increasing costs to our citizens and our businesses. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Chairman Court.
Thank you for that. Just, you mentioned the metrics. My good friend, Representative Todd Jones would call it the data, showing, the results of these states that have done this. I'd love to get a copy of that.
We can certainly provide that. And we've got data from each of these states that have those authorities. Some of them do have sunset provisions, so they have to come back before their various legislatures to prove their effectiveness. And to my knowledge, there's never been one that has sunset. I know Texas has just gone through a sunset hearing, as well as Colorado. So we've got some good metrics. They have reduced vehicle crimes. They have provided in-depth analysis that helps all of the various jurisdictions. They can provide funding for equipment that can be used. There's remarkable high-tech equipment that helps. It's expensive, and particularly for smaller agencies. The creation of either a statewide auto crimes task force or regional task forces could be extremely helpful. The authority itself could have its own sworn law enforcement, as the Georgia World Congress Authority, as an example, has. So there are a number of ways this could work. There are a number of examples out there, and we can help customize something that will work specifically for Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I don't have further questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got him, Gary Tomlinson. Yeah. Yes, sir. We got him down here next.
Gary will be very brief. He'll be very brief. We know he wants to lunch. I'm Mary Kay Woodworth, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Urban Ag Council. And we're an association that represents the landscape, turf, and horticulture industry. And the members of our association are small business owners from 1 or 2 people, employees, to 500. And we're here just to briefly talk about, you've heard how the thefts and catalytic converter theft have affected larger industries, how it really affects the small industries throughout the state and the region of Georgia. And this is Gary Tomlinson, and he is the Vice President of Operations for High Grove Partners. And they're a large commercial landscape company in Austell, Georgia. And he's going to share what his company's experienced.
Good morning. Thanks to everybody for having us here and providing this forum that we can discuss and hopefully work together on this. High Grove Partners puts about 70 vehicles on the road every day. We take care of 600 customers. We provide 200 jobs for Georgians, generate about 18 million a year in revenue. Well, that being said, how the vehicle crimes really affect us is every truck that we put on the road, between the vehicle costs and the equipment costs, is $48,000. And where the vehicle crimes come in is it's a rolling warehouse of equipment for somebody to break into. And they're parked in the yards in the evening, and we spend about $3,000 per vehicle when it comes on board to get it hardened off or secured off, technology-wise, different kind of things to prevent them from being stolen. We had the vehicle stolen and the catalytic converters. In recent months, we've seen catalytic converter thefts on the rise. And as the lady from Enterprise pointed out, you know it when you crank your vehicle up in the morning and all of a sudden you hear it break loose in the yard. It sounds like you're at a drag race. Those vehicles can't go out that day. Those vehicles are stuck. So what that does is in some cases you have to send your employees home. We're a larger company, as Mary Kay pointed out, so we do have access to mechanics, so we can quickly get a catalytic converter and get it back on in a couple of days. But some smaller landscape companies, they don't have that opportunity. They don't have a spare vehicle sitting around. They're not able to either get their crews back out or get them fixed quickly. So we're able to get them back in the field. But the cost of doing that, because each vehicle has 2 catalytic converters on it, is around $2,000 a vehicle. So the 3 that we've had stolen recently cost us about $6,000 in repairs. And I would point out that all 3 of those vehicles had catalytic converter cages at a cost of about $1,500 a piece, and they were hardened off completely, and they still managed to get through them. And in one case, they had about $1,200 in property damage, getting through our fence, getting through our sensors, damaging the fence, basically figuring out how to bypass our sensors. So they are getting smarter. Criminals are getting smarter. They're figuring things out. And to work around that, we spent another $5,000 on the yard to stop them from doing that. In the last several years, probably the last 5 years, we've had 5 vehicles completely stolen. Those all were recovered. But when you do recover them, they're damaged. A lot of expense goes back into repairing those vehicles, not just where they damage them to steal them, and they usually steal them just to get the equipment off of them. In one case, they ran the gate that tore the front of the vehicle up. They bust the locks out to get in the ignition switches, but then on top of that, two of the 5 were completely vandalized at the end. So they were pretty much totaled out. Like I said, I would keep it brief for you. The vehicles are recovered. It does take several weeks to get them back in. As far as working with law enforcement, we do have video monitored surveillance systems on all of our yards that are monitored, which is very helpful if you have a yard. That way the police are not responding to a maybe, they're responding to actually, yes, I see a person in the yard. They're on video. And in all cases where we've worked with law enforcement, predominantly in Cobb County, DeKalb County, and Forsyth County, and in Gwinnett County, they've always asked for video. They've always followed investigations. When a couple of arrests have been made, the case, sadly enough, is pled out, and usually the individual's back on the street. That's pretty much what I got with that being said. Anybody has any questions?
I don't have any questions. But no, I think you've hit basically what everybody's been hearing. Even though we do get them arrested, they end up getting played out or they're back out again. And that's something that we've got to figure out how to stop. And I think that's gonna be if nobody's scared, they ain't never gonna stop doing anything. So.
In case anybody's curious, we had in Gwinnett County, we were, in probably the last 5 years, we've recovered 2 pieces of stolen equipment. I know it's not vehicle related. The 2 pieces of stolen equipment, we average about 40 pieces of equipment stolen a year. In case anybody's curious, a big walk behind a lawnmower is about $6,000. And of those 2 pieces that were recovered, the Gwinnett County detective we worked with, the one individual that was arrested in this had stolen in a matter of 10 days, had stolen and pawned about 65 pieces of equipment. And that was a single individual up in Gwinnett County.
Now, did he plead out or was he back out?
I'm not sure. We were contacted later on, but the sentence was already done.
Okay. All right.
We appreciate your time.
Well,
you.
thank
we
y'all
appreciate your
for,
time.
y'all and hate all this has happened to everybody here. But it is a problem and that's the reason we're here. Be helpful if some of y'all came with a solution. But that's our jobs. That's our next meeting. But thank all y'all for coming. Really appreciate it. Been open my eyes up in Chatsworth, Georgia. We don't have a whole lot of this. Your in-laws usually steal your car, but that's about it. You really don't want to go back and get it. You just let them have it. But thank all y'all. Hope y'all have a great week. We'll be back in touch with you.
Chief O'Connor still online? Chief O'Connor.
I am.
The question earlier with Enterprise about the multiple county ring and they confusion who had jurisdiction. Is that a legal issue, a liability issue, or what? Is it something we need to work on to allow them to work together? Could you speak to that?
Without knowing the actual specifics, it's hard to say, but generally what happened is, to give you an example, we would have people stealing, it was really like wreckers. So let's imagine somebody was coming by with a wrecker and stealing older model cars. They would steal the car in Fulton. They would recycle the vehicle in like Rockdale at the time it was called Newell's. It's since changed names and I don't know the new name, but what we would tend to do is we would cooperate. We got together with the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office in those cases because prosecutions were stiffer in Rockdale at the time than they were in Fulton, may still be the case, and chose to work the cases in Rockdale. So when we charged the thefts, we charged them in Rockdale because they were dropping the vehicles off there and you could do that. So but you have to get people to work together like that. And so I know when I was running our auto theft team, we were building those relationships, but as soon as I quit being the person in charge, I think a lot of those relationships fell off. And then soon thereafter, they dissolved the team. We've since reinstituted, but a lot of this is just based on like everything else, relationships and how people get along and do they build those relationships. The reason we're proposing what we've proposed with myself and Mr. Levitan and everybody else is it kind of forces that relationship into place and you create these multi-jurisdictional teams where there's that level of cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there's no other comments, questions, y'all have a great week. And thank y'all for all being here. We're adjourned. Oh, sorry, what? Okay.